Hello and welcome. A new year and a new you, or so you'd like to think. You'll stop smoking, lose weight, spend more time with the family or something similar. Although those three are close to the top of the list of standard New Year's resolutions for so many people. And of course they remain at the top of the list exactly 1 year later, after the champagne corks and celebrations have been cleared up, when broken promises, or in this case resolutions, are revisited. A new year means new opportunities for improvement. So why do an estimated 80% of people drop their New Year's resolutions within a month? On today's show, we talk to two leading experts on human behavior to find out how you can keep your resolutions in 2008. Don't forget, we take your questions and comments on this program. You can contact us by phone at our new number, country code 1-202-775-2360, or by mobile text at country code 447797 800 600. Joining the program from Los Angeles is psychiatrist Dr. Reef Karim, an addiction specialist and relationship therapist. He's not only a frequent contributor to television and the entertainment industry, but an actor as well. He's currently developing a new talk show on sex, drugs, and relationships. And here in Washington is Dr. Suena Huang, a specialist in addiction psychiatry at George Washington University. I welcome both of you. And Dr. Reef Karim, I'll start with you and ask what resolutions you made and if they've remained intact 1 week so far.
Well, so far they've remained intact, and my resolution is to be more of service. It's to volunteer more, to help other people more that can't really help themselves, because that's my profession.
Now, we're going to ask you more about how people might hang on to some of the ones they've made, which might be different, but let's ask Dr. Suena Huang, who's here in DC. Same, I guess, did you make anything that you said you'd keep for yourself in any resolutions for 2008?
Well, I did make a resolution to be on time, and so far I'm doing okay, and I'm here, so.
I was going to say, I'm glad you made it. Now, when it comes to the kind of promises people make themselves, what really do you find, we've listed some of them, the stop smoking, lose weight. Do people really set themselves artificial targets when it comes down to New Year's resolutions?
Well, I think it's encouraging that people see the new year as an opportunity for new hope, and I think we all want to improve on ourselves. So I think that it's valiant that people make attempts to better themselves. Whether or not the targets are realistic, I think they are. I think looking at them in a more systematic way to see how we can approach these might be the way to go.
Yeah, Dr. Karim, I wonder with, you specialize in addiction behavior. To what extent is there a problem of getting people to actually admit that there is perhaps a problem with their behavior when it comes to something they are addicted to, such as smoking or, excessive eating?
Yeah, I mean, admitting the problem, we all hear it. Admitting the problem is half the battle. It's interesting. If you look at the psychology of New Year's resolutions, the month of December rolls up. We're spending, we're overindulging in eating, we're drinking. We're basically guilt-free for the month of December because we're going to make all these changes in the month of January. Then the month of January rolls up, and you find that gym memberships go up. There's a decline in alcohol sales, there's a decline in cigarette sales, there's a decline in chocolate, and all of a sudden we have this resolve to make all these changes. But by February 1st, most of us have failed.
Well, I've got to ask you here a question we got by email, Dr. Karim. This came in from Joan in Virginia here in the USA, and Joan says, how do you avoid replacing one addiction with another? I lost weight, but now I spend too much.
Yeah, it's a great question. We try to target, oftentimes, if we just cut out that behavior or that substance that we're using ourselves, we just focus on that one thing. I'm not going to eat chocolate as much anymore. But we're not looking at the overall big picture. The big picture is impulsivity. If I tend to have that addictive personality, then maybe I'm going to eat lots of chocolate, maybe I'm going to drink, maybe I'm going to do all sorts of other stuff. And when you kind of tap the dam and you plug the hole in the dam on one, then some other hole is going to pop up. So you have to look at the big picture. The big picture is often, why am I more addictive than the average person, say? Or why do I have this impulsivity problem? And often underneath it, you find some other kind of mental health thing going on. Depression, anxiety, not getting over grieving for somebody. There's usually something else there that you have to target besides the actual addiction.
Well, I've got an email here I'll put to Dr. Huang, and this one came from Aga in Poland. And Aga says, before New Year's Eve, I prepared a list of my previous resolutions. I realized I had not fulfilled even one. So this year, no New Year's resolutions. I only promised myself to smile at least once a day and repeat, I like Aga.
Well, I'd be curious as to what some of these new these resolutions that were made in the past were. I think that I want to echo Dr. Karim in saying that people often see indulgence as black and white. So whereas there is no restraint exercise in December, often people rebound in January by aiming to be different. But I think that ultimately one of the reasons why people end up replacing one addiction with another is that that addiction, that behavior, is really a manifestation of something else, that people are, for instance, smoking to relieve stress, to become more relaxed at certain times, to deal with uncomfortable feelings. And what I try to encourage my patients to do is to cope with these feelings with a non-addictive behavior, with a healthier behavior, for instance, exercise or meditation.
I was going to ask if you use any particular techniques to try and make people deal with their issues more realistically.
Well, it's most useful to target therapies based on each individual's situation. So I try to look at what it is that people are using the behavior for. What is it that people are using smoking for? And very commonly it's to relieve stress. Often it's people say that they smoke because they're angry. It calms them down. Sometimes people smoke to socialize. It's a thing that helps them to bond with their friends. So just as changing your diet, you need to replace it with other food. You can't just not eat. Let's say you want to take a new way to work. You're going to avoid taking the expressway, so you need a local route. So we need to replace that behavior with something better.
I have to ask Dr. Karim, that the issue of smoking, it's one, I mean, out of all the people I've known all these years, there's only one smoker a friend who actually said, I smoke because I enjoy it and I don't ever want to quit. It seems everyone wants to quit. What is it about smoking in particular that's such an issue?
Yeah, you look at the nicotine receptors, and you know, if you look at some other drugs, like you look at heroin or cocaine or even alcohol, they hit the receptor in the brain. We'll get all scientific on you right now, but you hit the areas of the brain for a longer period of time. So what ends up happening is that you get a reward. You light up an area of your brain called the pleasure circuit pathway, the reward circuit pathway, but it happens for an extended period of time. For nicotine, it's a really quick hit. It's like filling the gas tank to full and then it drops to empty. And you fill it to full and it drops to empty every time that you take a puff of the cigarette. So it's so actively rewarding by taking that puff, and you feel so depleted shortly after taking the puff that it's an incredibly powerful process of developing an addiction if you're vulnerable to it.
We have an email I'd like you to tackle here from Mira in Georgia in the USA. Mira says, I gave up smoking for New Year's. The constant cravings unbearable, and I seem to have replaced one bad habit with another, feeding myself silly. All the medications, including nicotine gum, are failing me. Any suggestions?
Yeah, there's a couple things. First off, we've talked, both the other doctor and myself, we've talked about the underlying sense of anxiety, stress management underneath the smoking. I would definitely tackle that. I would either talk to a therapist or really focus on understanding the blueprint of why she has that anxiety underneath it. The other thing is Chantix. Chantix is a medication that's done pretty well on the market for smoking cessation. There's also Zyban that's been out there before, and the combination of nicotine replacement therapy with one of those medications will probably do you well as well. I'm one of the directors of a rehab out here, as well as my private practice, and I work at UCLA. We use those medications a lot, and I find that they're quite effective.
Okay, well, thanks for that. We'll ask an email question here to Dr. Huang, which came in from Valerie in Texas here in the US. Valerie says, what if your goal is to find a healthy relationship? Do you have any tips for that?
Well, I do see patients in my practice who have this goal, and this would be, I would think, a very healthy New Year's resolution. Any tips? Not specifically, not without knowing you, Valerie.
Pick the right person, I guess.
Good luck.
Now, I was going to ask you what you make of the whole issue of life coaches. A lot of people seem to be, tapping into an expert or someone who comes in and basically helps them shape their life, including dealing with things like addictions or dealing with personal issues. How do you rate this idea of having this almost like a life secretary?
Well, I think it can be very helpful for people to have someone whose objective, whose sole goal is to help one to live a fuller life or accomplish whatever goals one wants to accomplish in life. I think that a therapist, a counselor, or a psychiatrist can also fill this role pretty well.
Dr. Karim, you're a Hollywood insider, and I guess life coaches have become a pretty big thing certainly with the sort of busy Hollywood set.
Yeah, life coaches are hot. To quote Britney Spears. Basically, what ends up happening is a lot of people need structure in their lives, whether it's for an addiction or it's for a mental health problem or it's just because you're kind of freaked out and you don't know what to do with your life. So instead of adhering to hanging out with your family and focusing more there or focusing more internally, they want to externalize what's going on. So they try to find somebody. So this new, career developed in called life coaches. And basically, I find that they can be really useful if they can connect you to what you already have found that you want to do. So if you can kind of, I use the term blueprint a lot, like it's like an owner's manual. You have to learn about you. And once you learn about you and you figure out what motivates you, what drives you, what turns you on, then you need the contacts or the networking to figure out how to get to that place by utilizing the resources that you have. And I think life coaches can be really good to find those resources.
Are you surprised, Dr. Karim, by constantly seeing in the magazines, the gossip columns about the so-called dysfunctionality of the celebrities? We were seeing there Britney Spears with her head shaved. There's talk always about the sagas of people like Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie and so on. Again, being there on the inside of the Hollywood set, do you find yourself a little bit? Do you find yourself at all surprised by what you hear?
Well, celebrities are people too. We have to remember that. And they have frailties just like anybody else. And the disease of addiction is non-discriminatory. You could be a homeless guy, living outside of a dumpster, or you could be a famous celebrity living in Bel Air. Doesn't matter. Addiction is addiction is addiction. The difference, though, is that a lot of celebrities don't have downtime. There's no place for them to go. The paparazzi is following them around constantly. And they don't really have or are willing usually to just sit back and restore their mental health, get a sense of who they are. A lot of them are really, they're given to society. Society owns them in many ways. And what ends up happening is they don't develop identities of their own. And when you don't have your own identity, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you stand for, you got a problem. You have to learn about you.
Is there, Dr. Huang, is there a big difference between men and women in their approach to self-discipline issues, addiction issues, and so on?
Well, in fact, this is a really hot area of research. There are actually gender differences in addiction, in smoking cessation in particular. Just about a decade ago, there were more men smokers, and for whatever reason, the number of men and women smoking now and trying to quit smoking is almost equal. And there are some theories as to why that is. Women seem to have a harder time quitting smoking. Some have related that to a possibility that the nicotine withdrawal syndrome may be more severe in women. But the other thing, quite simply, is that one of the nicotine withdrawal syndromes involves weight gain, and women tend to be more sensitive to this this syndrome.
What about cultural differences? How much is that studied in the way people respond to when it comes to certain behaviors? Is that studied much? Different cultures?
Well, among different cultures, there are different levels of acceptance towards looking at addiction. In the United States, there's a growing acceptance about looking at addiction as a brain disease, and this is largely due to new neuroimaging studies that have come out of the National Institute of Drug Addiction. Dr. Karim had mentioned the neuroimaging showing that brains of addicted people are actually different, and so that we see a growing acceptance of addiction as a disease and not a moral deficit in this country. In other countries, I can't really speak to that.
Well, Dr. Karim, are we programmed as humans, are we programmed to be addictive in nature?
It's a great question. Great question. Because you think about it, we're all talking about this war on drugs. Are we ever going to really win the war on drugs? And it's a philosophical debate, because if you look at it, are we a society that wants to be altered in some way? You look at business meetings, you look at sporting events, you look at the holidays. A lot of us are drinking. A lot of us are altered. We go to bars. We use the social lubricant of alcohol to meet people. Half the people I know got married because they were liquored up at a bar somewhere and they met someone.
Remind me not to hang out with your set.
Yeah, I know. We'll hang out, Riz. We'll talk sometime. You look at the month of December. Yeah, people have the motivation to change and to have a New Year's resolution is based on overindulging and being fat, drunk, and you know, and just laying around on your couch while you're eating holiday cookies. You know, that it's very easy to say you're going to quit smoking when you've just had a cigarette, and you're going to diet when you've just ate a bunch of Christmas cookies, you know?
Well, you know, we promised our viewers some advice as well, and this email just came in, question just came in by SMS, I should say, from Vincent in the UAE, and he says, I have an addiction for alcohol. What is the first step to overcoming this?
Well, I think he made the first step, which is I have an addiction to alcohol. That's really the first step. What you need to do, alcohol is a very, very complicated drug. It's a very dirty drug, which means that it activates it has a lot of metabolites that kind of focus all over the body. The first step is, I believe, is to find an addiction treatment person, either an addiction therapist, addiction psychiatrist, addiction medical doctor, and get plugged into the system. Because there's a big system in addiction, and specifically for alcoholism. It's AA meetings, it's a sponsor, it's going to either an outpatient treatment program, a sober living, or a rehab. It's continuity within a community that all has the same goal, which is to be sober.
Now tell us briefly about your new show that's coming up, Sex, Drugs and Relationships.
Yeah, you know, I'm an addiction medicine specialist, a psychiatrist, and a relationship therapist. And, you know, I'm a little on the younger side, and I've got the ethnicity too, which is different. So we're focusing on a late night talk show. It's in development right now, which basically deals with sex, drugs, and relationships. Things going on universally on the street, in your house, at a club, whatever. And it's behavioral intervention done by a psychiatrist, but done in a very kind of light, sometimes funny, sometimes serious way.
All right, well, let's get from Dr. Huang maybe a word of advice on anyone who's watching who wants to be able to hang on to some of their New Year's resolutions. What's the best advice you could give on how to hang on to the resolution?
Well, I think a lot of us tend to think in terms of black and white. You know, if I've messed up on my diet, I've blown it, and I might as well have the whole rest of the box of cookies. If I've had one cigarette, I might as well go out and buy a pack. It's really about moderation. It's also about not seeing things in black and white. There are many, if you haven't smoked for a week and you mess up and have one cigarette, you haven't lost all the benefits to keep going at it and to keep on persevering.
So the idea is not to give up, basically. It is to be persistent.
Exactly. Be forgiving of yourself, and it's not all in black and white. Even cutting down the amount you smoke is going to have some benefits for your overall health.
Well, Dr. Swen Huang, thank you very much. Dr. Reef Karim, good luck with the new show. Thanks for joining us there from LA.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot. And thank you for being with us. On tomorrow's show, we look at the situation in Pakistan with human rights activist Asma Jahangir and former US Assistant Secretary of State Carl Inderfirth, who worked in the region. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world or that subject, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk's coming up next.